From now on, we will begin Prime Minister's press conference. First off, for Prime Minister, there will be remarks. Prime Minister, the floor is yours. Right before this meeting, about COVID-19, we held a response headquarters meeting, Hokkaido, Miyagi Prefecture, Gifu, Aichi, Mie, Shiga, Okayama, and Hiroshima will be added to state of emergency prefectures. At the same time, Kochi, Saga, Nagasaki, and Miyazaki will be added to priority measures prefectures, and the term for each from August the 27th to September the 12th is going to be the period which was decided in the meeting. New infections are record high and making new records. In particular, in Chubu area, high infection rate has been observed. Across Japan, in almost all areas, unprecedented infection expansion is continuing. The health centers system and the medical system are pretty much under strain, so therefore, bed occupancy ratio is going to be taken into account and was taken into account for exercising the decisions that I have just described last week. In these areas, medical care system establishment and anti-infection measures and vaccination rollout, consisting of these three types of measures, I have said that we will thoroughly implement measures. With cooperation from the people of Japan, we need to make sure that we overcome such a crisis, and my determination is unwavering. There has been a rapid infection expansion, and that's giving a lot of anxiety to many people. Medical care system has to be provided for everyone, and emergency medical measures will be thoroughly and swiftly implemented. The lives and livelihoods of the Japanese people need to be protected, so we will carry out whatever is necessary one by one. About securing medical system and capacity. Number one, the people recuperating at home need to be taken care of. For those people, they must be worried a lot. At clinics where patients had a first visit, the health observation and consultation and the telephone consultation should take place depending on the situation in each region. With the medical association's cooperation, we'd like to establish such a system swiftly. The other day, a pregnant woman who was recuperating at home couldn't be coordinated for the acceptance and hospitalization, and she has lost her baby, which was quite painful. And we have to make sure that the pregnant women who contracted the virus have to be taken care of, and we have to secure advanced medical system. Even in emergency cases, we have to make sure that those people are sent out to hospitals, and the hospitals and the fire departments and the office has to share information. Number two, we have to make sure that we have the right occupancy ratio for beds. 2 days ago, to metropolitan medical institutions, based on the Infectious Diseases Act, the central government and the Tokyo government made a request for securing the medical system and for issuing the state of emergency declaration this time around. From the central government to each prefecture, beds have to be maximized and medical system has to be built up swiftly. So that was the request that we made. So as for the Japanese government, we have to enhance And we have to make sure that the prefecture's medical system is built up with our full support. And also in the National Organization of Hospitals, the number of beds for COVID-19 should be up to 200 so that they can function as a national new COVID-19 countermeasure center. Because of the spread of COVID-19 cases right now, some people are saying that we have to have an all-out effort to establish a front-line hospital structure. In hospitals, they might have some empty beds, and also we have to utilize some other systems, and also emergency facilities with oxygen. We have 14 such centers right now in nationwide. And in the areas where we have the state of emergency declaration, we will have to increase the number of such temporary centers and those centers with oxygen. And also using new drugs, new neutralizing antibody drug. In 1,400 hospitals, we have 10,000 administrations, doses used on patients. And some people are saying that they are being very efficacious. And this drug was mostly for hospitalized patients. However, we would like to use such neutralizing antibody drugs to people who are out of the hospitals. We have to secure the volume, the doses of the drug. And we have secured the necessary doses for those people with more than 50 years old and also people with a basic pre-existing conditions. We will have to make sure that they are not going to be serious cases. Unfortunately, we have an increasing number of children who contract the virus before the new school year, a new semester in September. We will have to make sure to have countermeasures against COVID-19 so that we can prevent infection among children. Infection in schools should be prevented so that it's not going to spread. We will have to make sure that we'll have checklists, and if they have fever and so on. School children shouldn't go to school. That is one of the basic countermeasures against COVID-19. And kindergartens and also elementary and junior high schools, we are going to distribute the testing kits for about 800,000 tests so that we can identify early cases. And also vaccination among school staff and teachers should be expedited. Up to now, at the large-scale vaccination centers with self-defense forces and also more than 700 vaccination centers at universities, we had vaccination efforts going on for school staff and teachers, professors. We would like to make better use of those opportunities so that we can expedite vaccination of those school staff who hope to be vaccinated. And also, we are not thinking about requesting uniform closure of schools. However, when they have newly confirmed cases, schools and local governments have to identify close contacts and also to identify patients. And for that, we would like to expedite the process to show the guidelines from the government: masking, hand washing, and also avoiding 3 C's. And those are very important, especially mask wearing. When you talk to people, it's very important. Once again, I would like to ask people to abide by the rules. And in restaurants and drinking establishments, they have to reduce working hours, and also we have to control the inflow of people. And the transmissible Delta variant should be addressed, and we have to address infection in department stores and other places where a lot of people gather. We would like to review the guideline per category of business. And in terms of online telework,
each workplace has to devise their own programs. And last spring, a lot of businesses were able to reduce 70% of the workforce who come to the office, and it has been successful. And one by one, people have to avoid high-risk actions and also high-risk places. Vaccination is going to continue, the pace of which is 1 million doses until the end of August per day, and at least 43% of people completed full vaccination. So totally 120 million doses were vaccinated.
At corporations and universities vaccinations sites, on top of 2,400 sites, 140 sites have been just added. And by the mid part of next month, around 1,500 sites will be added to the scope. And against such a backdrop, by the end of the month, almost the majority of the entire population will get vaccinated twice, and by the end of September, around 60% of the population will complete the vaccination program, just like what's happening in the UK, in the US as well. And this time, in particular, there is an aggravation happening to the people in their 50s. So far, around 50% of the population got vaccinated once. And the people who got vaccinated twice, we have 30% of such a population, including such people. We make sure that we accelerate the vaccination program. And by the end of this week, 1.4 trillion yen reserve will be decided, and including neutralizing antibody, and we need to cover emergency needs and emergency and employment adjustment subsidies, and for emergency small amount fund, we'd like to make sure that we have the perfect measures. And for bars and restaurants, as for cooperation fund or financial support, last month we have implemented a new RE application system in the metropolitan area. In almost all the areas, the provision was completed. And this time there was an addition of these areas, and including those added areas. As for other areas, together with each prefecture, we will collaborate so that we can provide such funds as soon as possible. We have a tense situation continuing in Afghanistan. Let me just talk about this area. Last night, a G7 conference call was attended by myself, and we talked about the future measures and how to collaborate among each stakeholder. We had a candid opinion exchange. First off, the people, the Japanese people staying there and the local staff of the embassy, their safe evacuation has to be prioritized. Already, locally, there was a dispatchment of the SDF aircraft, and by utilizing such aircraft, we'd like to make sure that we have perfect measures. And Afghanistan shouldn't be another hotbed for terrorism acts. And humanitarian crisis has to be avoided locally, and we have to also make sure that the women's rights are protected. With G7 countries and the stakeholders, we will closely collaborate. Geopolitically, Afghanistan is in the center part, so the stabilization and reconstruction also serve our national interest. So local situation and surrounding situations need to be discerned, and strategically, we will tackle with this matter. With a high infectivity, we have the spread of the Delta variant, and it's difficult, even more difficult, to contain the new infections. However, vaccination rollout is now underway, and for the Delta variant, we have evident effects, and new therapeutics will also be able to prevent the aggravation. So we have a light at the end of the tunnel. And as for the expiration date of the state of emergency and the priority measures, new infections and bed occupancy and medical strain will be taken into account for exercising a decision. Beyond this, vaccination and vaccination certificates, how to leverage such certificates will be marked. And bars and restaurants and events and travel will be taking or making use of that certificate so that we can recover socioeconomic activities.
We would like to overcome this situation with all-out effort. I really hope that we can obtain cooperation and also understanding of the citizens of Japan. Thank you very much. Now we'd like to receive questions from the floor. Dr. Omi, could you please go to your position? Depending on the contents of the questions, we would like to ask Dr. Omi to answer your questions. When your name is called, could you please go to the microphone and state your name and the company name before you ask questions? So now we'd like to receive questions from Mr. Sato of Hokkaido newspaper. My name is Sato, Hokkaido newspaper. In the press conference as of the end of July, you said that you have to be ready for the announcement of the last announcement for declaration. However, we have 21 prefectures for the state of emergency, and including priority measures, we have 33 prefectures, and a lot of patients are recuperating at home. Maybe the cause is that people are not really listening to your voices, and also your voice is not reaching the people. And also September 12th is the end date for the emergency situation right now. Well, for some prefectures, well, the period is pretty short. Have you thought about the date for the election for the LDP president? And also in the spring last year, we had pretty good control of the people flow. Do you think it's necessary right now? Do you think we can lift this measure by 12th of September, really? So what do you think about this situation? So first about a Delta variant. Because of this variant, we have unprecedented spread of COVID-19 infection. This has impacted our country as well. Healthcare situation should be strengthened, and this is our top priority. Infection control and vaccination. We have 3 pillars, including that, and we have to thoroughly implement those measures so that we can overcome this crisis. And this is the responsibility that is something the Prime Minister, myself, have to bear. And also you have pointed out about my statement before. I would like to receive it, accept it sincerely so that I can take sincere measures going forward. And also as for the due date of this declaration, as was in the previous regions and prefectures, we have to secure healthcare organization situations and also vaccination and also infection control. And we have decided on September 12th because of the necessary period to implement those measures. And also nationwide declaration, you pointed out, as I have mentioned before, healthcare and also infection are different depending on prefectures. In some of the prefectures, the measures we take should impose such burden on those citizens. And that is why, based on that situation, I made this judgment and decision. And as for the infection control, we have asked restaurants and drinking establishments to reduce working hours. And also we have entry control of large-scale buildings and events. And also we are recommending remote work. And we would like to continue taking effective countermeasures. And also the exit strategy. Of course, we have to establish good healthcare structure so that we can reduce serious cases. We have to thoroughly implement those. And also we have to establish a good expedited process for vaccination nationwide. Thank you. Dr. Omi, do you have any comments about exit strategy? Yes, about exit strategy you mentioned. Well, in this context, you are talking about lifting of the declaration, right? As for the lifting of the declaration, this state of emergency declaration and the previous declaration, the goals of which are very clear. The goals are to address and mitigate the strained situation in healthcare. The first one was in April last year, and probably you remember there was an overshoot situation, but it's not because of the overshoot we had the state of emergency declaration. The healthcare situation was pretty strained. That is why we declared state of emergency. So the strained healthcare situation should contain two aspects. The first one, we have COVID-19 patients. Full treatment is being provided or not. That is one aspect. Another aspect is general healthcare and medical situation. Does it exceed the certain standard criteria or not? Well, I understand lifting of the measures is the focus of attention right now, but to what extent we have been able to mitigate the strained situation? Of course, the number of newly confirmed cases, how it's increasing is important as well. And I think this is the most important thing to see how strained the healthcare situation is. The government is trying to open new temporary healthcare facilities and also temporary assignment of doctors who are not engaged in COVID-19 treatment. If possible, we would like those doctors to treat COVID-19 patients during this period. That is very important.
This is followed by Sankei newspaper Sugimoto-san's question. Sankei newspaper, my name is Sugimoto. Today in the morning, you met with the Secretary General of the RDP, Mr. Nikai, about COVID-19 measures and about the future schedule of politics. What kind of conversation did you make about the political schedule if in that meeting with Mr. Nikai, even when it is not mentioned, what is your own idea? The schedule for the LDP presidential election and whether or not there will be a cabinet reshuffle and the extraordinary sessions, a convocation, and the general election or the diet members election. What is your take on those dates? First, about the meeting with Mr. Nikai, like this, today, a state of emergency and priority measures have been issued, and given such a situation about infection status, I believed him. Beds have to be maximized and secured, which is the utmost importance. So the prefectural association or the branch, we need to collaborate so that the LDP can cooperate on securing more beds for people. So that's the kind of conversations that I had about COVID-19 and about the LDP presidential election. On this front, tomorrow, there will be an election committee to be held. And I myself, and for myself, there was a question about the dissolution election for the lower house. I think options are very limited, but COVID-19 measures have to be the first priority, like I have said before, repeatedly, and against such a backdrop, I'd like to exercise a right decision.
So from here, I'd like to open the floor for your questions. We'd like to point you, and so could you please go to the microphone? NHK, Mr. Osanai. My name is Osanai from NHK. I'd like to ask you, the Prime Minister, in LDP, they are saying that some of them are saying that the next election is going to be very difficult. But before that, are you thinking about appointing party executives before the LDP election? No, about the appointing party executives, I am not thinking about anything. No plan.
Next, I'd like to take a question from videonews.com. Jimbo-san, please. Video News. My name is Jimbo. Thank you. Prime Minister, your term as a LDP president, the remaining period is 1 month. And you already expressed your intention to file for candidacy for the next one. And here's my question. Whoever becomes the president of the LDP, COVID-19 measures are going to be the first priority for sure. However, Prime Minister yourself expressed your intention to file for candidacy for the next one. So you yourself, about the Suga administration, the COVID-19 measures, you think that they are working. And this is a representation of your such a intention, I think. So how do you look back on the Suga administration's COVID measures? The COVID measures is number one priority. Do you think it is functioning well? If so, what is the ground for saying this? And if you find any problem, what's your idea or policies? In the next administration, where do you think has to be changed? Can you elaborate as much as possible on this front? First, I myself, last year, I was inaugurated in Prime Minister, and before that, the LDP's president. And since then, almost every day, I was working and serving my time around and centering on COVID measures. In the beginning about the new coronavirus, this virus was quite mysterious and the whole picture couldn't be clarified in the beginning and the measures had to be put in place. However, what's becoming is just like overseas, even when you have lockdown, it didn't really work perfectly for containment, and we have a spread of the infections in foreign countries. Through vaccination rollout, they're normalizing their lives. Therefore, I would say about the COVID vaccinations, I have worked all out. And as for Japan, as for vaccinations, we have a different kinds of history. So therefore, it requires precautious and very cautious decision. And in the right session, domestic clinical trial should be conducted, and that was a mention. And usually, the clinical trial causes several months of delay. And domestic clinical trial caused almost a 2 to 3 months delay compared with advanced nations in terms of vaccination, or the countries who invented and developed vaccinations. However, after we started the vaccination in May, in June, 1.1 million per day, and later on, 1.5 million was administered. And in August, including Auburn, we were able to surpass 1 million doses. Such measures are already in place, and by the end of August or by the end of September, just like what's happening in the UK and Europe, in the US, vaccination will be rolled out, like I said before. So in this regard, about vaccination, I have put all my energy, which was good, as soon as possible. To the people of Japan, we'd like to make sure that people can regain their normal lives. So therefore, I'd like to work out in this regard, and the medical care system has to be secured, which is quite important to Dr. Omi's point. And regarding this point, in national hospitals, for vaccines, the beds are now being secured and the system is being covered. So COVID measures will be accelerated so that people can normalize their lives with all our efforts. Please refrain from commenting from your seat. Regarding your point, compared with other countries, the number of death tolls, when you compare such and such numbers, I think it is crystal clear. And with all our efforts, we'd like to carry out these measures.
Shigeta-san from Nikkei newspaper, please. My name is Shigeta from Nikkei newspaper about vaccination. 70% of the population has been vaccinated in Israel. However, in that country, there is a drastic increase of COVID-19 cases. As the time goes by, the number increases. That's the trend. In Japan, since the vaccination started, it's been 6 months or so. And about the third dose, a third vaccination, from when are you thinking about starting it? And because of the Delta variant, there are a lot of COVID-19 cases among children. And what do you think about vaccination among children who is less than 12 years old? Israel and in the UK, after full vaccination of 2 doses, it's been more than 8. It's been very close to 8 months, and they have breakthrough infection cases, and that is why they are examining the possibility of the third dose to be vaccinated. I understand that in those countries, the efficacy to prevent serious illnesses is observed, while in Japan, still, we haven't reached such month since the start of vaccination. More than 65 years old, 85%, more than that, that population in that age bracket has been at least vaccinated. Right now, 88% to be exact. So drastically, we were able to reduce the death because of COVID-19. So the vaccine has been very efficacious. And about the third shot next year, Pfizer for the third shot. Well, we secured the right doses for the third shots for next year. So if when officially we decide on from when we are able to do it, so we are ready. And about vaccination of children below 12 years old, right now, outside of Japan, they are doing clinical trials. And we will have to watch how it's going to be successful before we make our decision in Japan.
TBS 後藤さん。TBS, my name is Goto. I have a question for Prime Minister about teleworking. We're working from home. So by recommending working from home, 70% of commuters can be cut back, and that's your aim. In this case, about the working from home, the government measures should gain a lot of attention. And in late March and beyond, you haven't taken a whole day off. When you observe in Prime Minister's office and in the Diet or person's building, you have been working. So if you yourself work from home, or if you can roll it out onto government offices, what do you think would happen? About working from home, of course, teleworking has to be promoted. And today, for priority measures and for state of emergency, we have added prefectures, and we have mentioned working from home. And that was used actually. And yesterday, I also used it for regulatory deformation, and that has to be expanded going forward, I think. And I myself, in this regard, wherever necessary, I'd like to carry this out myself.
はい、それでは文化放送の山本。
Yamamoto-san from Bunka Hoso. I have a question about COVID-19 countermeasures. Before you were talking about vaccination and also the end of the cocktail treatment, and you said you see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, we haven't really reached the peak of the infection. We are not really sure. Do you really think the citizens of Japan can see the light at the end of the tunnel? We are not really sure. When can we really reach the light? We don't really know when the peak is, and your idea is the effect of the lockdown is limited. But do you think you are going to take one step forward for this emergency situation? For example, road pricing and so on. This is a drastic measure. Well, and there are some voices to ask you to take more bold measures. And also, Dr. Omi, you say, well, we have to take concrete measures, but what kind of concrete measures do we have to take so that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel? As I mentioned before, the strategy of the government is to have the priority vaccination of people who are over 65 years old, and also the first dose is 85% and the second dose is 88%. So as a result, the second dose 85%, the first dose 88%, and right now it's only 3%, not 2%. So that means it has been very efficacious. And nationwide, the first dose was vaccinated to 54% of the population. They have completed the first shot. So as in the age bracket of more than 65 years old, we would like to make it 80% and over 80%. If we can do it, we can reduce the number of newly confirmed cases. And also we can reduce the death cases. That is apparent. And people who are over 50 years old, people who are in their 50s, this antibody cocktail treatment so that they don't get serious illnesses. And right now we are targeting 10,000 patients with the cocktail, and it has been very efficacious. That was reported. And if we can continue that, we can prevent serious conditions. That's clear right now. So we have two weapons right now. So that's something we'll have to pursue. That's important. At the same time, to prevent infection, we have to control the people flow by recommending remote work, and also we'll have to establish good healthcare situation so that we have enough beds for treatment of COVID-19 patients. So we'll have to establish good foundation. By doing so, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we are beginning to see the light. And that was what I meant. About the rational and convincing concrete measures. Actually, in Tokyo, we are under the state of emergency declaration. And 2 weeks ago, the government said that we have to reduce 50% of people flow. There was a request from the government. And by cooperation of a lot of people, one time it became 35%. But nowadays, again, there is an increasing people flow. This is the reality for us. People, it's hard for people to cooperate. It's hard for us to obtain the cooperation of people. This is the reality that we have to accept right now. So we have the state of emergency declaration, but having this declaration does not unconditionally solve problems. We will have to convince general public with rational measures, concrete measures. That should be very important. And right now, schools are going to start, and as schools are starting, as they are reopening after the summer break, we are concerned about another wave of infection. So I'd like to take an example of schools. For example, 4 measures. Well, schools include daycare centers to universities, colleges. So depending on the uniqueness of each educational organizations, we'll have to take measures. For example, kindergartens and daycares will have to vaccinate those teachers at those facilities. That's very important. Number 2, applications to monitor health conditions of people. We have such applications. We have to use it to monitor people, and if people become even mildly sick, we can send those people to PCR testing. We'll have to thoroughly take such measures. And also, especially sport players in colleges and high schools, of course, they are very young. They want to engage in sport. Of course, we understand that. So right before club activities, maybe they can take antigen testing. And number 4, right now, people flow should be watched. It's important, especially in terms of spread of COVID-19. What is important is in colleges, for example, college students are adults. They are very active in the society. So during this very difficult period in universities and colleges, maybe they should have such remote work. That means online classes. That's something they have to do. Vaccination, testing, science and technology utilization. And also, by doing so, we'll have to convince people, we'll have to obtain people's cooperation. However, we'll have to be ready for the worst case scenario, as I mentioned before. Diet members, parliamentary members, I would like to ask them so that they can take some actions to convince people so people can cooperate, and also the medical institutions can cooperate more. The diet member, I would like to appeal to diet members to have discussions with general public, with town hall meetings and so on, and also to come up with legislation.
As for TBS Godo-san's question, working from home and online conference, I mixed it up, so sorry about this. Kochi newspaper, Igarashi-san. I have a question for Prime Minister about COVID measures. This time, including Kochi, 4 prefectures are now added to the priority areas. And apart from some metropolitan areas, the local infection centers, what is the government's perception? What is your take? At the same time, the National Governors Association, whether it's a state of emergency or priority measures, there has to be a nationwide and a uniform rollout, which was requested. On this point, uniform or nationwide measures, how do you see the needs of exercising such measures across the board? About Kochi Prefecture, new infections already are equivalent to stage 4, and there is a rapid and sharp increase. So therefore, the bed occupancy ratio is also stage 3, and based on that, we also listened to the expectations of Kochi Prefecture, and we raised this case to today's meeting, and we have decided to let them in. And in each prefecture across Japan, uniformed measures was mentioned. Situation is different in each areas and corner of the prefecture. And we have different circumstances of different regions, so we try to heed such differences as well.
それではジャパンタイム杉山さん。
Japan Times, Sugiyama-san. My name is Sugiyama, Japan Times. I have a question about Afghanistan situation. Taliban is not admitting the evacuation of Afghanistan people, but going forward, refugees from Afghanistan, do you think you can accept those refugees from Afghanistan going forward? First of all, for those Japanese people and staff members in the local areas should be evacuated. That's the top priority, and so that they can be secured in safe environment. And also, as for Afghanistan people who might come to Japan, we have to cooperate with the allies and the other countries to take into consideration the situation of each person.
テレビ東京
TV Tokyo Shinohara-san. Thank you. Today, because of the decision for the state of emergency and priority measures, we have 33 prefectures in the scope, and for the people who suffered for a long period of time, cash handouts are now being requested. How do you see such a need? About COVID-19, its impact is now being protracted, and the people of Japan, their jobs and livelihoods have to be protected. And because of the special exemptions for the employment adjustment funds, there was a support, and the people who are struggling with working capital, 1.4 million small amount of fund has been utilized. Each operator and each individual is inflicted differently with the COVID impact. So we need to pay attention to each circumstance to take adequate measures.
それでは西日本新聞
Furukawa-san from Nishi Nihon newspaper. My name is Furukawa. I have a question to the Prime Minister. Before you were talking about we have to overcome this crisis. And Dr. Omi, in the diet session, you said that the government analysis was a little bit optimistic. So the exit you're thinking about in this advisory committee might be different from the exit the government is thinking about. Have you listened to such severe opinions so far? First of all, the state of emergency declaration and priority measures, and as for the prefectures under those declarations, of course, the government's ideas were explained to the advisory committee, and we were approved. And this time, in addressing this situation today, in the committee, they made that decision, and based on the decision, we are going to take measures. And Mr. Nishimura, the Minister of State for Economic Policy, is already always in cooperation with Dr. Aomi. That was reported to me. And so we have the state of emergency declaration and priority measures. Those were decided by those experts.
フリーランスの大川さん。
Freelancer Okawa-san, please. Freelance Okawa. Thank you very much. I have a question for Prime Minister about the intellectually disabled people. And I'm engaged in operations, and the vaccination rollout is being delayed. And the users, they have behavioral disorders, and they cannot wear a mask. So therefore, a large number of people contracted the virus as a consequence. In the previous question, I mentioned about the welfare users and the welfare care workers, and to family members, you have said that there is a priority attached. However, there has been a delay and a cluster situation is happening. Once again, can you investigate so that for the operators and users, you can prioritize vaccination rollout, and those people, the patients, are now getting older, so their family members passed away, and they cannot be traced. And if they get complications with ECMO applied, the signature cannot be applied by guardians. So therefore, how do you see the medical care system needs for those people? A large number of people cannot get into hospitals via ambulances. So Olympic and Paralympic Olympic athlete village should be utilized for field medical institutions, and their care workers. I think there's a Nursing Care Act, and the nursing care helpers, they should also participate in support program. How do you see this? Regarding the points that you have made, the people with disabilities have different features, and we try to heed such differences to make sure that the anti-infection measures are put in place. So therefore, for the disabled people, the infection measures and manual was manual's creation, and the necessary anti-infection measures are supposed to be demonstrated. And there is also guidance and instruction provided by infection experts as well, as far as I hear. And to institutions or staff workers, we'd like to listen to the field opinions to take adequate measures and effective measures. And once again, I'd like to investigate so that I can, regarding the situation, we can make improvement.
はい、それでは恐縮でございますけど、あと2問とさせて。
So I'm sorry to say two more questions. Yoshura-san from Kyoto News. Yoshura from Kyoto News. About your schedule for diplomatic activities, the end of September, you have this presidential election for the LDP and also UN Assembly. And as for this schedule for the general discussion meeting at the UN, depending on that, right now, are you planning to go to the United States to make a speech at the UN? And at the same time, Quad, Japan, US Quad, how is the schedule for that? So first about the participation in the UN Assembly and also a Quad schedules. As of now, nothing is fixed yet. So right now we don't have specific dates, and when the specific dates are announced, I would like to think about this.
国定さん
Kyoto newspaper, Kunisada-san, this is going to be the last question. Kyoto newspaper, my name is Kunisada. I have a question for Prime Minister. So-called lockdown. I have a question on this front. In Japan, for Japan, a lockdown is not suitable, you said. However, Australia and other democratic countries have been able to contain the new infections with strict measures. And so far, Japan has never implemented such strict measures. And based on what ground do you think it's not suitable? I didn't get the idea. For drinking and eating, or bars and restaurants, you don't want to probably guarantee their suspension hours, or you don't want to provide the fund for such hours. What is the ground behind this? The reasons that I have said it is not suitable for Japan, this is based on the fact that we have to clear constitutional institutions. So based on the current legal framework of Japan, this will be very difficult. So that was a ground. I'm so sorry, but regarding the people who are raising their hand, so please let us know your questions, and we'd like to address your questions in writing. And this concludes the press conference. Thank you very much for your cooperation.